Hey everyone, this is Mike from the Comic Book Trove. I'm here today with another Marvel Omnibus review, and today I'm going to be diving back into the world of the X-Men and taking a look at the latest printing of the X-Men Age of Apocalypse Omnibus, which came out about a couple of months ago now, I think, at the time of recording this. This is the third printing of this book overall. No differences really from any previous printings that I've been able to notice or that I've seen anywhere else online, pretty much just a straight reprint. This cover here is the DM variant, direct market variant, the cover which is also a wraparound on the book itself by Joe Madureira. And if we just take a look at the general design of the dust jacket, so pretty typical of Marvel Omnibus. So on your spine you get, there is a slightly different image to this on the standard variant, the other variant cover, can't remember exactly what it is, but you get this pretty cool image of Apocalypse on the DM variant. And then on the back you get your cover gallery of issues, which is standard fare really for Marvel Omnibus, and then down here of course your contents of what's collected. Feel free to pause that and take a look through it. But so this event is very kind of well known, very iconic, big X-Men event from the mid-90s. It ran mainly through 1995 I believe, and it was a significant one that I was missing out on. I hadn't actually read all of this all the way through until just recently after picking up this omnibus. I always kind of knew what went on in this event. I got the gist of it and understood what the premise was, but I never actually made my way to actually picking it up and reading through the entire thing. So it was interesting to finally get a chance to do that with this latest printing coming out. I'll just quickly show the wraparound art from the book. Is the same as what's on that cover for the dust jacket for this particular variant, but it's a nice design, nice artwork by Joe Madureira. And if we just take a look inside, then basically I'll discuss it a little bit as I go through it, so there'll be some spoilers in here. Just want to point that out now because I feel like in order to discuss it and review it within any kind of proper detail I need to discuss a few plot points, not every single little thing. But yeah, I'll go into some detail, so if you don't want to know anything about this book or about this event, then this might be something you want to check back with later on when you've had a chance to read it maybe. But anyway, the first thing you come to really is this contents page. Just what I do like about this in here is it breaks down each of the individual series that this collects. So you start off with Legion Quest, which sets the entire thing up, and you've got X-Men Alpha, Amazing X-Men, Astonishing X-Men, Factor X, Gambit and the Externals, Generation Next, Weapon X, Excalibur, X-Man, X-Men Omega, and then a couple of bonus things in the back. And what it does by breaking down each of these sections, most of them have 4 separate issues, so 4 issues of each of these individual series, and it tells you kind of who the main writer was, main penciler, and the rest of the credits for each series really, each ongoing series that made up this big story that is Age of Apocalypse. So the premise then, it all starts with these issues of Uncanny X-Men and Adjectiveless X-Men, and it's the story arc known as Legion Quest. And basically what's going on in here is Legion, who is the son of Professor X, he gets it into his head basically that he needs to go back in time and kill Magneto, because he's decided that Magneto is pretty much the root cause of so many of his dad's problems in life, and if he were able to get rid of Magneto, then things would always have been much easier for Professor X. Now, this plan backfires, to say the least. Not that it's a well thought out plan to begin with, but he does go back in time. He goes back in time to a point where Charles Xavier and Magneto, who at this point is not using the name Magneto, it's just Eric Lenshaw. They're friends, so they're good friends at this point, and so in his attempt to kill Magneto, Charles effectively dives and takes the bullet for him, so to speak, and accidentally Charles Xavier is killed instead of Magneto, and that triggers this entire kind of tangent in the timeline that sets events into motion that creates ultimately the world of the Age of Apocalypse, a world in which Charles Xavier never formed the X-Men, and there were effectively nobody to fight for and uphold Charles Xavier's dream of unity and peace between mutants and humans. So yeah, it's a very grim beginning. It's a very kind of dark prologue, and the entire event really is just incredibly sort of heavy. You know, this is not a light-hearted story. And it kind of starts off here really with the X-Men Alpha. This very much is your introductory issue to what the Age of Apocalypse is. So at this point, all that stuff with Legion going back in time, Professor X has died, and now we jump forward and we see this new world, which at the time was kind of marketed in such a way, if I'm remembering correctly, that it wasn't entirely clear that this was a temporary thing. You know, it was very much up in the air. Maybe this new Age of Apocalypse world was going to be just the new status quo going forwards, and this is what X-Men was going to be like. Thankfully not, because it's all very difficult to read. And now I will say that this has taken me a few weeks to get through. It's by far not one of the quicker omnibus I've read through, because I just had to kind of keep taking breaks from it. Not really because I wasn't enjoying it, but just because it's so kind of emotionally hard hitting. There's just so much misery and pain and torture and death in this storyline. It's honestly can be too much. Like sometimes I just needed a break to read something a little bit more lighthearted and just, step away from the kind of downbeat story that this is. And that is entirely the point. So don't get me wrong. That is what it's supposed to be like. It's a dystopian future. Apocalypse has set up a kind of totalitarian, ruthless, merciless regime. Him and a bunch of his allies, effectively people who are loyal to Apocalypse, have created this new, very depressing world where most humans have been killed or are enslaved and forced to do slave labor for the regime. And it's all kind of in America. So America is now no longer America in this story. It's like, I don't even know if it has an official name. It's just Apocalypse Land. And the whole kind of standard status quo of X-Men is totally mixed up. So you've got people who are normally heroes in the main Marvel universe in the normal X-Men timeline are now villains, and vice versa. So for example, you've got Sabretooth is a loyal member of the X-Men, and you've got like the Beast and Cyclops who are evil and working for Apocalypse. So the whole kind of thing is that Bishop, the Bishop from the main Marvel timeline, the original X-Men timeline, he finds his way here. He's kind of the only person who wasn't wiped from existence when the Age of Apocalypse was born, and he is able to reach the X-Men and tell them all about how the world is supposed to be and how Professor X was supposed to live, and the world was going to be a better place, and Apocalypse would have never risen to power. So Magneto kind of latches onto this idea, but chooses to believe Bishop. Other X-Men are skeptical about it, but ultimately, over the course of the events, things become clear that he's telling the truth, and so the entire point of the event becomes trying to put a plan together and act on it to undo this whole reality and try and put things back to normal. And that's the gist of what's going on through all of this. But my main criticism of this, I think, is that, and it's the same criticism I could apply to many kind of big comic book events, especially those from the 90s. It just kind of goes on a little bit too long for me. Like the beginning, I liked the beginning part, setting up what the Age of Apocalypse is. I liked the first few issues that introduce you to this kind of new reality. But then it's the middle bit, like things just kind of go on a little bit too much, and it was a bit of a slog to read through it all. But then the pace picked up again towards the end when all the kind of plot threads started coming together and culminating into what turns out to be the big finale. So yeah, I read through the first few issues really quickly and ultimately read through the last sort of 10 or so issues really quickly. It's just that middle chunk that for me was a bit of a struggle to get through. And as I say, that's partly just because of how depressing it is. The heroes are they seem to be thwarted at every single possible turn, through here. There's so many times where they're like that close to getting to the objective, and then somebody betrays them, or one of Apocalypse's goons just springs out of the shadows and's like, haha, you thought you were going to win, but you're never going to win. And it's that kind of thing over and over. And it gets kind of exhausting. You just feel so bad for the good guys. And even the good guys in here are not exactly good guys. This world has kind of tainted everybody. So even even the good characters kind of have to do some very morally questionable things just in order to survive and to have a chance at winning. So yeah, you get different. So each of the different series in here are focusing on kind of different groups and individuals. The X-Men are a team; they are a group as a whole. But what ends up happening is quickly everybody's going off in different teams for different objectives. So, for example, you've got a series called Weapon X that's focusing on Wolverine. You've got Excalibur, which is focusing on Nightcrawler, and he's on a mission to go to save or retrieve Destiny, the mutant Destiny, because she's able to kind of see visions of the future and possible realities. So she's going to help corroborate if Bishop's telling the truth. You've got Gambit. He's leading a team into Shi'ar space to try and retrieve a particular special crystal that's going to help put the world back to normal. You got this new character in X-Man. This is Nate Summers, and he's kind of I don't know, his story is a little bit complicated, but he's the result of a genetic experiment, I believe. If I understood correctly, that Mr. Sinister kind of created him using genetic material from Cyclops and Jean Grey, so he's kind of their son, but not their son. But he is extremely powerful, and that's his power just grows throughout the series, and it focuses on him because he's being tutored by Forge, and it's becoming clear that he's going to play a key role in taking down Apocalypse, and loads of stuff going on. Honestly, it's almost too much to take it all in, like when you read all this in one go, because it's really kind of convoluted, to be honest. I think it could have been streamlined quite a bit. And there is a companion omnibus as well to this. There's an Age of Apocalypse companion, a separate book, which has also been recently reprinted that goes with this one. There's not really anything in there that you need to read to understand this, but it's kind of a book that you can read I think if you really enjoy this Age of Apocalypse stuff, you can kind of get the companion omnibus and get kind of more of that, But most of the stuff in there is stuff that took place after this. But for me, anyway, it's not a book I feel like getting because I didn't love this enough that I feel like I need more of it. I feel like I had more than enough of the Age of Apocalypse from this main event in here, personally. But, I'm not going into it with any kind of nostalgia for it, or anything like that maybe would help me enjoy it a bit more. And I don't mean to say that it was all bad, but certainly I didn't love it. I've got to be honest and say it wasn't one of my favourite things. I think the Joe Madureira art, though, was really cool, and I did like that in these issues that he drew. But a lot of the artwork, for me, it was just kind of... it's that kind of seriously extreme 90s style, which you'd think goes without saying because it's from the mid-90s, so of course it is. But I haven't really commented on it so far, but as I flick through the pages, you may well have seen many examples of it, I'm sure, that it's just... It's that kind of classic 90s thing where some of the artwork is okay, and some of it is just a lot less okay. Not my favourite style, like from any of the artists in here, again. But it is something I'm glad to have read. I will say that, it is obviously is a significant piece of X-Men history, and it's something that, I'm very happy to kind of have it under my belt, so to speak, and having read it, and I will reread it. Got to just emphasize again that I didn't hate it. It's just maybe I wasn't in the right kind of frame of mind to enjoy it, just because, I'm all for stories that have a kind of dark tone, but I think you've got to be in the right mindset to enjoy those. And I just think that maybe, just in general, I just wasn't in the mood to read a lot of this, and I was trying to force myself to read it anyway, and that's on me. If that's my fault, really. But anyway, I kept pushing on, and I finally got through it. But definitely something I will check out again, and give it another go through at some point. Maybe having a better idea of what to expect might benefit me, possibly. But yeah, it is a bit of a difficult read. As I say, it's very hard hitting. There's not many, if any, real light-hearted moments in here. And I just want to kind of emphasize that because I often see this story given as an example of a good place for new readers to start reading the X-Men, and I would quite strongly disagree with that. I mean, technically you can read it. If you've never read the X-Men before, you could go in here and certainly read it. You wouldn't be lost as such because, it's effectively one big what-if scenario, so none of the prior continuity of X-Men matters so much, but I will say that you really kind of benefit from knowing who these characters are meant to be and then seeing who they are in this reality in terms of hammering home the fact that this is wrong. This reality is wrong and it needs to be put right. And I think if you don't know any of these characters or only know very few of these characters, then that will be kind of lost on you. For example, when you see the Beast and Cyclops loyal to Apocalypse and doing things that those two characters should never be doing, that just makes it extra jarring. It makes it it's more impactful, to see it because that's not who these characters are. If you've never read an X-Men comic before and you jump straight in here, I don't think you will appreciate that as much. And that was probably the best thing about it to me, was just that kind of, that element of knowing how wrong this is meant to be. So feeling the pressure to put it back, the stakes were very much there. So I did appreciate, all these different missions that are going on in here, very much high stake missions. And you do feel that kind of pressure that the characters are under. But sometimes for me, it's just the pacing. It's just a little bit slow. Like, I think things could have just been a little bit snappier in places. Things just seem to drag on a little bit here and there. And as I say, there were just a few too many instances of the same kind of thing happening, with the bad guys just turning up at the last possible second to thwart the heroes right when they were almost at the goal. And that happened just, I think, a few too many times for me. It just became more frustrating than anything else, and you just want to see things move forward. But, that's only ever going to be my opinion. And I know that this run has its fans. There are people who love this. I'm absolutely sure. I know they do. But yeah, it's not something I want to criticize too much. It's not that I hated it at all. It's just that I didn't love it. It just kind of sits somewhere in that sort of generally pretty good area of stuff. So it's definitely not bad, but it's not the best for me. It's just kind of good, Good with too many points for me that prevent it from being great. I think the easiest way to describe it is there's certain omnibus that I'll pick up and I will find myself like I've got to just read through it, and you'll finish an issue and you think just one more issue, and then just one more issue, and before you know it, you've read a huge chunk of the book in one go. With this book and with other books, sometimes I find myself like I just read this issue and then I'm going to take a break, and that was happening quite a few times in this book. That's why it's taken me weeks to get through it. And as I say, there's no real kind of just one thing that caused that, more like 2 or 3 different factors. But I will definitely say that I finished it just in the last couple of days, and the last sort of, with all the different series, as I mentioned before, they're broken down into 4 issues, and I think the 4th issue of each one, where everything was finally starting to wrap up and come together and build towards a conclusion, that's when I found myself getting the most invested, because it finally felt like the story was going somewhere. There's like 2nd and 3rd issues of each one were just sort of mulling around and just dragging on a little bit. And I was just kind of thinking, come on, let's get on with this. And then finally those 4th issues, everything was finally wrapping up, and I was like, yes, stuff's happening, good stuff's happening. Finally I can get behind the good guys. They're actually starting to win. So it was ultimately satisfying in the end. It took a lot of work to get to that point. So what ends up happening in the end is, everyone realizes Bishop is right. They get the crystal that they need. They get Destiny, and they rescue Ilyana Rasputin. She was also important to the plan. And they bring all these things together, and they are able to ultimately send Bishop back, and he stops Legion from killing Professor X. The very ending though, that's again, so that's, I think this is it, X-Men Omega. So it all begins with X-Men Alpha, it all ends with X-Men Omega, which is here, the Omega issue. And this is the grand finale. So this is after all 4 issues of all those different mini-series, effectively. It all comes to a head in this X-Men Omega, and that is pretty much one big fight between Magneto, the X-Men, Apocalypse, and his kind of few remaining loyal soldiers, I suppose. Loyal minions, goons, whatever. And this is the issue where they managed to send Bishop back. But for me, it all ended kind of really suddenly. Like, there was so much build up to this. There's so much of that stuff that you had to read through all of that stuff to get to this one issue. This is where it all culminates, and it just kind of happens so quickly. You know, this is always going to be the problem, I think, when you build up to a big conclusion and you put that conclusion in just one issue. You've got to rush it. And to say there was so much time where things could have been done in a faster way all through the rest of this, to then suddenly pick the pace up so much right at the end here, it was really quite jarring, and it made for, ultimately, for me, quite an unsatisfactory ending in terms of the very end of the story. Because it just kind of, it pretty much happens almost as quickly as just saying, and then Bishop went back and fixed it and everything was good again. That's pretty much what this issue is. You know, there's a big fight going on the entire time, but that's the crux of what happens. And in these final few pages, which are these ones, you see Bishop going back. He stops Legion. Here, stopping Legion, literally just kind of grabs him, stops him, and that's pretty much it, you know. Magneto manages to beat Apocalypse, but that is almost secondary, because the fact that Bishop's been able to go back and fix everything makes this big explosion, just kind of consumes this world and undoes it. And, you know, in terms of this very ending bit, so you go from Magneto beating Apocalypse finally, very kind of supposed to be a very big, momentous moment, to the world ending and the entire story ending on the next page. And that's it. And then you've just got basically extras in the back. So I felt a little bit cheated in a way by that ending. I kind of felt like I read through all that and you just ended it on me that abruptly. Now, I know, well, actually I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming in the issues immediately after this, and back in the main Uncanny X-Men and X-Men series, because I haven't read those yet either. You know, as I say, this era is one of the gaps in my X-Men knowledge. I'm assuming there's something to address this being undone that gives that a little bit more of a conclusion. But if that is the case, I wish that was in here, at least excerpts of it, because, as I say, I just found that ending just a bit too blunt to be satisfactory, in my opinion. So, I realise I've been quite critical of this book, maybe overly critical. I didn't really mean to start this review out and just absolutely just slate it and criticise it so much, but I feel like I have done. But I just kind of want to bring it back in a little bit and say, you know, that as much as I've had a go at the ending there and criticised that, I didn't hate the book overall. I just feel like it was, if I could summarise it all, I suppose, just a bit too long, frankly. It's not the ultimate X-Men event, in my opinion. There are some far more enjoyable X-Men stories that I've read set, you know, both before and after this. So all in all, it's a book that I will go through again at some point and just kind of give it a second chance, just to see if a second read changes my opinion at all, because sometimes that does happen. It's happened to me before, so I'm not ruling that possibility out. But all in all, this is not what I would recommend as a starting point for X-Men. For any readers looking to find out where can I start reading it, I don't think this is a good place at all. And really, I think you should read a whole bunch of other stuff before you potentially come to this. But at the end of the day, obviously, those choices are up to you, and I can only give my opinion. But regardless, thanks for watching through this video if you've made it this far. As always, I appreciate any support you can give, any likes on the video, comments below. You know, I'm happy to discuss anything I've said here, any of your thoughts on the book. Feel free to let me know if you agree with anything I've said, disagree with anything I've said. You know, I'm happy to have a discussion. But yeah, as I said, thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll be back again with another video.